In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, September 11th, here in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol returns home early Monday morning from India, where he pledged greater financial support for recovery efforts in war-torn Ukraine during the Group of 20 summit in New Delhi this past weekend. Also in New Delhi, U.S. President Joe Biden sits down for an unscripted talk with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, during which the former claims, quote, stability was discussed, as is the gist of his current trip to Vietnam. And it's a race against time, according to rescue workers searching for survivors from the rubble of devastated villages in Morocco's Atlas Mountains, following a deadly earthquake last Friday that has taken the lives of over 2,000 people thus far. President Yoon Suk-yeol is home on this Monday from New Delhi, where he put into action his pledge for Korea to play a greater role in addressing global affairs, a role that reflects the country's economic standing in the international arena. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has pledged $2.3 billion to support recovery efforts in Ukraine and renewed his call for universal norms on digital technology, presenting ways to secure a prosperous future for the world. Speaking at the G20 summit on Sunday, Yoon said Seoul will announce a $300 million package for Ukraine in 2024 and a $2 billion mid to long-term support plan consisting of long-term low-interest loans in 2025. The initial $300 million package will cover development cooperation and humanitarian aid, which would include the participation of international organizations such as the World Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. This comes after President Yoon in July had a surprise meeting in Kyiv with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky and pledged to roll out official development assistance to help rebuild the war-torn nation.
This demonstrates Seoul's responsible role in leading the way to support the restoration of peace as a global pivotal state that contributes to freedom, peace and prosperity in the world, while also laying the foundation for full-scale participation in Ukraine's reconstruction in the future.
Further elaborating on South Korea's role and contribution to a free and rules-based international order, President Yoon also emphasized the need to strengthen the role of multilateral development banks. In order to respond to new challenges such as overcoming the climate crisis and strengthening food and energy security, Yoon said it is vital to expand available financial resources and debt restructuring programs for low-income countries. Yoon pledged efforts to lead such discussions as Seoul serves as a co-chair along with France in the G20's International Financial Architecture Working Group. Addressing the fast-evolving advancement of digital technology, President Yoon renewed his push to establish new universal norms and established an international organization that addresses the misuse of technology and the widening digital gap between societies. A presidential official said Seoul will soon prepare and announce a digital bill of rights that ensures all people in all societies can enjoy the right to digital technology and push for measures to address the benefits and side effects of AI and digital tech, as well as the need for a consensus on ethical and moral norms. The South Korean leader in June proposed a set of basic principles on the ethical and sustainable use of technology.
President Yoon stressing the importance and necessity of digital norms has been recognized by the international community, as shown by the G20 summit communiqué, which reflects Seoul's plan for cooperation in establishing international AI governance.
Presenting measures to pursue freedom, peace and prosperity in the world amid complex challenges and bridging gaps between the global north and south. The top office says President Yoon aims to solidify Korea's status as a responsible actor in the international community as a global pivotal state. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, New Delhi.
On the margins of the G20 meeting, President Yoon also sat down separately with his counterparts from Japan and from the U.S. to reaffirm commitment to the agreements reached during trilateral talks at Camp David back in August. Here's our correspondent Kim Do-yeon.
Wrapping up the diplomatic super week of ASEAN and G20 summits, the presidential office said Sunday that what was achieved during the overseas trip reflects what South Korea, the U.S. and Japan declared at the Camp David summit just a few weeks ago.
The principles and spirit of Camp David have provided a basis for agreements during summits on ASEAN and G20. Specifically speaking, the trilateral cooperation of Camp David aims to contribute to the Indo-Pacific region, especially in areas such as development, maritime security, and the growth of advanced digital technology.
This also comes as President Yoon reconnected with the other two leaders from the Camp David summit. Although short, Yoon and Japan's Fumio Kishida met to reaffirm their commitment to taking responsibility with regard to ongoing global crises. In addition, the two spoke about preparations for a trilateral summit between Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing, possibly a move to seek Beijing's cooperation in dealing with North Korea's recent provocative behaviors. He also met with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden a few times, exchanging light jokes and conversation, while sitting next to him for an hour and a half during the gala dinner, an opportunity to speak candidly about ongoing issues. According to the top office, Yoon also met with the leaders of more than 20 countries during this past week, using the opportunity to drum up support for Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. The final vote on hosting duties will take place at the Bureau International des Expositions in 2 months. He made sure to let those leaders know that the Busan Expo will focus on solutions to crises the world faces today. Kim Doyan, Arirang News.
And President Yoon also held talks with the host of this year's G20 gathering, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and touched upon the merits of mutual efforts in space exploration and smart cities. Our Jong-un explains.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have agreed to cooperate as key strategic partners in the Indo-Pacific region. The leaders held a bilateral meeting on Sunday on the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi as the two countries mark a milestone year in diplomatic ties.
The summit focused on expanding the balance in trade, investment in digital and green industries and advanced technologies, while expanding public-private cooperation, marking 50 years of diplomatic ties.
Among the key sectors will be space, on the back of South Korea's successful launch of its first homegrown space rocket Nuri in May, and India having made history by becoming the first country to land on the lunar South Pole region.
We will push for space cooperation between South Korea's soon-to-be-launched space agency and India's space agency, boasting 50 years of history. And we will foster research in space missions and satellites at a joint research center in India.
On the defense front, Yoon and Modi also agreed on South Korea's continued provision of its K-9 howitzer and expand arms trade. And they also expect more active business exchanges with the easing of customs procedures under the expected launch of an electronic certificates of origin platform this year. Also under a $4 billion development cooperation fund by South Korea, domestic companies are expected to take part in more of India's infrastructure projects like smart cities. The meeting comes after President Yoon also met with Korean companies there and vowed to address their concerns to Modi, such as India's recent export restrictions on electronic devices, high tariffs on food, and lack of infrastructure projects for companies to take part in. Young-un, Arirang News.
Also in New Delhi, U.S. President Joe Biden met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang on the sidelines of the G20 summit in an impromptu encounter before flying into Vietnam in line with broader efforts to reportedly ensure stability. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
On the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi, India, U.S. President Joe Biden held talks with Chinese Premier Li Qiang. Sunday's meeting between the two marked the U.S. leaders' highest-level talks with the Chinese leadership in months. Following the talks, and after arriving in Hanoi for a state visit to Vietnam, Biden stressed that the U.S. does not want to contain China, but instead called for stability in the Washington-Beijing relations.
And so really what this trip was about, it was less about containing China. I don't want to contain China. I just want to make sure we have a relationship with China that is on the up and up, squared away.
Biden also stressed that China is changing some of the rules of the game without elaborating further to the reporters on what rules he was referring to. He also noted that the U.S. is not trying to decouple from China, but instead not selling Chinese material that would enhance their capacity to make more nuclear weapons. Biden followed up his G20 summit appearance with a state visit to Vietnam as the U.S. works to cement closer ties with another one of China's neighboring countries. During his trip to Hanoi, he announced that the U.S. and Vietnam would elevate their relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. There, the U.S. leader also secured deals with Vietnam on semiconductors and minerals, with the Southeast Asian nation quickly becoming a major player in Washington's bid to secure global supply chains outside of China. The latest elevation in partnership means that the U.S. is now on Vietnam's highest diplomatic status list, alongside China and Russia. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
While speculation mounts over an imminent departure to Russia by North Korea's Kim Jong-un, back on Sunday, Kim was seen posing for pictures with participants of a paramilitary parade. According to the regime state-run media, the photo session took place at Kim Il-sung Square, where the parade was held to mark North Korea's 75th Foundation Day. Previously, some had spoken about a possible train trip to Vladivostok by Kim on Sunday to meet with Russia's Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the Eastern Economic Forum, which is currently underway. Authorities here say no information on Kim's trip has been confirmed, but Japan's NHK claims Kim may depart on this Monday. Morocco is reeling in the aftermath of a tragic earthquake last Friday that has killed over 2,000 people and injured just as many. Our Shin Se-byuk covers this calamity.
More than 2,100 people have been killed and over 2,400 injured in Friday's powerful earthquake in Morocco. The 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck with an epicenter some 72 kilometers southwest of the North African country's historic city, Marrakesh. The deadliest quake to hit the country in 6 decades was quick to turn buildings and homes into rubble.
Everything is gone. We lost everything. We lost our entire house.
There are still people buried here in this house. They didn't get the rescue they needed, so they died.
The United States Geological Survey on Sunday issued a red alert in preliminary assessments for both estimated fatalities and estimated economic loss caused by the quake. This is the highest possible alert level in the agency's 4-tier alert system. This means, in terms of economic impact, extensive damage is probable and economic losses could range up to 2% of Morocco's GDP. The agency also expects that there is a 35% chance that the death toll could rise to 10,000 people and a 21% chance casualties to range between 10,000 to 100,000. Meanwhile, the Moroccan government on Saturday declared a 3-day national mourning period as rescue efforts continue. The government is mobilizing armed forces to provide affected areas with supplies such as drinking water, food, and blankets. The international community is also expressing condolences and vowing to provide necessary support to Morocco. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, during his opening remarks at a G20 summit session in New Delhi on Sunday, said South Korea will provide the necessary assistance to help Morocco's recovery from the earthquake. South Korea's foreign ministry also issued a statement vowing to closely cooperate with the Moroccan government and the international community to provide support. Turkey, where a deadly earthquake killed more than 50,000 people in February, is among the countries lending a hand. Algeria, which broke off ties with Morocco over a diplomatic row 2 years ago, also said it would open up its airspace for humanitarian and medical aid. The United States has also dispatched a team of disaster experts to assess the situation and to identify humanitarian needs. Other countries such as Spain, France, and Israel are also deploying resources and personnel to provide necessary support to Morocco. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
In other news, new findings show the GDP among OECD nations, member nations that is, surpassed its pre-pandemic level, that is, from the fourth quarter of 2019 by 5.1% in the second quarter of this year. According to the organization on Monday, by country, the Korean economy expanded 5.9%, putting it in 16th place. The U.S., for its part, gained greater with a 6.1% expansion, while neighboring Japan posted a relatively modest expansion at 3%. 36 nations out of the OECD's 38 members marked improvements, with the exception of the UK and the Czech Republic. Seoul is offering those in the capital city the chance to indulge in a captivating drone light show every Friday night until late October over the Hangang River. My colleague Choi Soo-young was there.
On Friday night, Seoul invited citizens to an astonishing drone show over the Hangang River. 1,000 drones depicted Seoul's major landmarks, including Gwanghwamun and the Hangang River night view, before ending the show with Seoul's new slogan, Seoul, My Seoul. Visitors said they were captivated by the sophisticated beauty of the drones, which offered a charm distinct from traditional fireworks.
I was so shocked. When I was watching it, I thought it was better than fireworks. It was honestly it felt so surreal. It was so beautiful.
I think it showed a lot of really great scenes around Seoul, and I've seen a lot of the real places, and it made me remember those places and the times I visited them. So it was really great.
The 2023 Seoul Drone Night Show provided citizens with new entertainment during the Seoul Festa held in May, with a total of 4 performances. This fall, it will be held regularly at Duksum Hangang River Park Riverside Stage every Friday until October 27th, except for the Chuseok holiday and September 29th. The drone performances have different themes each week, such as Seoul Night Tour, Jazz Night, and Dream World. The show, which starts at 7 p.m., lasts for about 10 minutes.
Citizens can enjoy not only a drone show, but also cultural and artistic performances, making it even better for relaxing in urban spaces on an autumn night to the fullest.
Battery limitations mean the show only lasts 10 minutes, but there's plenty of other entertainment, from performances to busking shows. Visitors can also enjoy camping along the Hangang River while watching the show or just relaxing with their families.
I came here with my child, and it's so nice to feel refreshed. Thanks to the Seoul government for providing this wonderful experience free of charge.
Visitors can find more information through Seoul City's official Instagram or by calling 120 to contact the Tasan call center. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
From inspiration to creation to promotion, every iconic fashion brand, as industry insiders say, has a story of origin. And here in Korea, quite a number of them originate from Dongdaemun. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
It's a regular weekday afternoon, and designer Kim Min-seok is working to bring his creative ideas to life. Kim is the head designer for a women's apparel brand that his father started 30 years ago in Dongdaemun. The Dongdaemun area of Seoul has been the cornerstone of Korean fashion for more than 60 years. Packed with giant shopping malls, wholesale, and retail stores, it's one of the few fashion hotspots in the world where everything, from design and production to retail, happens all in one place. Over the decades, Dongdaemun items have earned a reputation as being stylish, affordable, and good quality. However, the area has encountered a series of challenges since the 2010s.
It began when China decided to ban Korean culture as a response to that. While there was a bit of relief from local sales, domestic demand started dwindling with the emergence of online shopping malls hitting Dongdaemun's wholesale markets hard. To make matters worse, after COVID-19, around 70% of retail store spaces are now empty.
One effort to revitalize the Dongdaemun area is the DDF fashion show. Organized by the Seoul city government, the show took place for the first time this March, responding to merchants' calls for a platform to showcase their homegrown fashion brands and talented designers. For the second edition, 5 Dongdaemun-based brands were chosen, including Kim's, to introduce their latest collections. Some of these brands come from the oldest fashion markets in the area, like the Jeil Pyeonghwa Market and Cheongpyeongwa Market. For these brands, opportunities like this can serve as a jumping-off point for future success.
I look forward to more opportunities like this in the future. I hope these platforms can help raise awareness about wholesale brands like us and showcase our unique styles and trends.
It's our first time taking part in a live fashion show, so it's very nervous, but at the same time, I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity. The stage is small at the moment, but if we keep pushing forward, I think it'll expand in the future.
This is how Dongdaemun is striving to make a comeback. 송유진, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the United Kingdom, a former soldier and suspected terrorist has been charged for escaping prison. The charges follow a 4-day nationwide manhunt for 21-year-old Daniel Abed Khalif, who was caught by a plainclothes police officer on Saturday in the West London town of Northolt. Khalif was riding a bicycle at the time. The former soldier had vanished from the Wandsworth prison on Wednesday morning local time. It's suspected that he escaped by attaching himself to the underside of a food delivery van. Khalif had been awaiting trial for terrorism and Official Secrets Act offences. He is due to appear in court on Monday. After weeks of criticism, suspended Spanish football president Luis Rubiales has resigned from his post at the Royal Spanish Football Federation over the so-called unwanted kiss scandal. News of his decision was released Sunday in a clip from Piers Morgan's TV show posted on social media. Rubiales also said he has stepped down from his vice president seat on UEFA's executive committee. It comes amid backlash that erupted when Rubiales kissed player Jennifer Hermoso after she received her winner's medal following Spain's 1-0 victory over England at the Women's World Cup final in Sydney last month. Rubiales had called the kiss mutual, but Hermoso disagreed, saying she was not respected. The backlash has cast a shadow over Spain's first-ever Women's World Cup win and led to players announcing boycotts and even legal complaints against Rubiales. Now, Germany has won its first-ever Basketball World Cup title after going through the tournament unbeaten. Die Mannschaft claimed the Naismith Trophy after beating opponents Serbia 83-77 in the final on Sunday, in the Philippine capital of Manila. The scores were tied 47 each at halftime, but Germany had a strong third quarter, securing a 12-point lead and staying ahead until the end. Germany's previous best result was a third-place finish in 2002. The FIBA Basketball World Cup is held every 4 years, with the 2023 tournament being held in Indonesia, the Philippines, and Japan. And finally, a runner has completed a 51-day charity run from Amsterdam to Kyiv. 28-year-old Dutch native Boas Krachtvig took on the challenge to raise money to buy ambulances for Ukraine and to show people just how close the war is to Western Europe. He arrived in Ukraine's capital on Sunday and was joined by hundreds of supporters for the last leg of his 2,500-kilometer journey. The run, which crossed through the Netherlands, Germany and Poland, was divided into portions of roughly 50 kilometers per day. Krachtvig said he was able to raise over $60,000 through his GoFundMe page. It's enough to buy 2 ambulances. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. We are heading into mid-September, but afternoon temperatures in many parts are still hovering around 30 degrees Celsius, which are 3 to 4 degrees higher than norms. Morning temperatures should have dropped into the teens by now, but we had a warmer start to the day, with temperature gaps of 7 to 10 degrees between lows and highs across much of Korea today. Inland regions are under mostly sunny skies, but east of Jeju will see rain before sunny skies return. Then there will be passing rain in the south and east of Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do with 5 to 20 millimeters of sudden showers in the forecast. Afternoon highs in Seoul and Gwangju should top out at 30 degrees. Busan and Jeju will hike up to 29 degrees. Now this week will not be as sunny as last week. East of Gangwon-do and the southern provinces will see rain midweek, while most of Korea will see rain on Friday. But this week's weather pattern will gradually push temperatures down to near the norms. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And that brings us to the end of Monday's edition of the Daily Report. As always, we have our panel session coming up right after this break, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? I'm live.
저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지. 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Federico Cuello. I am the ambassador of the Dominican Republic in the Republic of Korea. Arirang is the one channel in which ambassadors have a say. Ambassadors' opinions are taken into consideration. Ambassadors can promote what they are doing. I am truly grateful to be asked to speak for Arirang. I hope Arirang continues and diplomat talks continues as well, because really it is the one window in my 6 postings as ambassador I have found to speak about my work and to speak about those issues that are of relevance for the Dominican Republic and for Korea. And I look forward to coming back as many times as possible during the remaining time I have here in Korea, resonating with the world with Arirang.
I've always wanted to try the temple stay program. But is this really a Buddhist temple? How about trying out this temple stay right in the heart of the city?
What matters?
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. Are you excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
President Yoon Suk-yeol returned home early Monday morning from New Delhi, India, where he partook in multilateral and bilateral summits under the framework of the Group of 20, as well as business-related gatherings over the weekend. So what are some of the gains of this year's G20 summit? What are the implications of the Delhi Declaration? And what are some of the remaining diplomatic tasks? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today we delve into the notable gains and remaining tasks of the recently concluded, that is, Group of 20 summit over in New Delhi, with a focus on President Yoon Suk-yeol's diplomatic agenda there. For more on this, I have research professor Pan Gil-chu at Ilmin International Relations Institute over at Korea University. Welcome to the studio, Professor Pan.
Good afternoon.
I also have Khonseo with us as always, so it's good to have you here.
Happy to be here, Sunny.
So let's start off then with details about the Delhi Declaration.
Sure. So the 37-page joint declaration, which was adopted by the Group of 20 in New Delhi, addressed political, economic, and environmental challenges that the world is dealing with today. In its preamble, the document says that the G20 met at a defining moment in history and that the decisions made will determine the future. The Delhi Declaration is dominated by topics like ensuring growth, accelerating sustainable development goals, fighting poverty, dealing with the climate crisis, preparing for new health emergencies, reforming multilateral development banks, tackling debt crises, creating jobs, and closing gender gaps. Now, regarding geopolitical issues, which usually receive a lot of attention ahead of a multilateral gathering like the G20, India was trying to focus away from these tensions, it appears, as the G20 host had hinted months ahead of the event to convince the G20 members to find amicable ways to solve geopolitical issues such as the Russia-Ukraine war. The declaration avoided any direct condemnation of Russia for the war in Ukraine Ban instead called on all states to refrain from using force to seize territory and abide by the UN Charter. It did emphasize the human suffering in Ukraine and noted the negative impact of wars and conflicts. With that, the communiqué called on the implementation of the so-called Black Sea Grain Initiative, as Russia's war in Ukraine has stalled exports of grain and fertilizers to developing countries like Africa.
Right, indeed. And staying with the Delhi Declaration, Professor Ban, some pundits claim that this particular declaration takes on the characteristics of its host country. What do they mean, Professor Ban, and do you agree?
Well, before we go for a deep dive, we need to realize the fact that this G20 gathering occurred amid the growing new Cold War situations. So they could be divided over many issues. The Bali Declaration reiterated their positions expressed in a series of international organizations such as UN Security Council, including Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Similar to last year's declaration, the Delhi Declaration pointed to earlier resolutions as SOA pointed earlier. So it is true that this type of the message could be more assertive. It is really hard, but at the same time, the war continues today. So it is also true that this declaration falls short of expectations. So if then, what led to falling short of expectations? That's exactly you are asking. So as you mentioned earlier, probably I believe the Delhi Declarations reflects India's the characteristics. For basically, India remains ambiguous in international politics. She wants to serve as a bridging role between the group of the democracy and the group of democracy. For example, India is one of the G20 members, but at the same time, it belongs to Shanghai Cooperation Organizations. I would say it looks basically a strategic ambiguity to me, but India says it is a strategic autonomy. So all in all, the Delhi Declaration partly reflects India's ambiguous positions.
Right, and before we delve any further, Swa, for the sake of comparison, could you tell us a bit about last year's Bali Declaration, which Professor Ban touched upon, on the plight in Ukraine amid Russia's invasion?
Right, the war in Ukraine already appears in the third paragraph of the first page of the 2022 Bali Declaration, stating that there was discussion on the issue during the meetings. It cited a UN security resolution deploring the aggression by Russia against Ukraine in the strongest terms and demanding the complete and unconditional withdrawal from Ukrainian territory. It went on to say that, quote, most members strongly condemned the war in Ukraine. Reasons named were the causes of immense human suffering, as well as the impact on the global economy, that having been further described by constrained growth, increased inflation, disruption of supply chains, energy and food insecurity, and growing financial stability risks. The statement did mention, though, there were discrepancies in how member states viewed the situation and sanctions against Moscow. So compared to the Bali Declaration, the Delhi Declaration, according to many experts, had a much softer language in terms of Russia's aggressions. Not only according to experts, just if you look through the two documents, you do feel the difference. The Bali Declaration is mentioned, by the way, also in the Delhi Declaration, as the Delhi statement says that concerning the war in Ukraine, the discussion in Bali has been recalled. But while mentioning UN resolutions, condemnation was not expressed. While there was some criticism regarding this year's wordings, especially from Ukraine, which said the G20 has nothing to be proud of in terms of the part about Russia, many other leaders deemed it significant that a text was able to be adopted, at least, as there were concerns that this year's meetings may end with no declaration at all.
Right, and staying with the Delhi Declaration, Professor Ban, it also asserts, and I quote, the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. What is the significance of this particular statement, Professor Ban, with regard to North Korea's nuclear weapons ambitions?
To be honest, it is important to know that this message came just right after two serious events regarding North Korea's nuclear posture. The first event was that Kim Jong-un commanded a full-scale nuclear exercise while targeting South Korea and the free world. Second, North Korea launched so-called nuclear submarine, to be more precise, a diesel submarine with 10 vertical tubes for nuclear weapons. These two serious events were intended to show the international society that North Korea is both willing and capable for using nuclear weapons. So when timing is taken into consideration, this message could contribute to restraining North Korea's nuclear provocations. The other point that I want to take a look at is that both China and Russia also signed this declaration. So North Korea is expected to reconfirm or recognize her key allies' intentions and positions. So this could also help restrain North Korea's provocations. Partly, if you ask me why this restraint could be just temporal, partly, I would say first, the Bali Declaration is just a political statement with legal binding. So we are living in a world where power is at the forefront, not norms and rules. That explains why we need to preserve a rules-based international order. Secondly, amid the growing nuclear mechanism, both China and Russia need North Korea. Russia needs rockets and shells from North Korea. China needs strong support from North Korea in an effort to seize the initiative of U.S. China strategic competition.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, so against this dismal backdrop then, despite differences over Russia's war in Ukraine, I understand there was quite a bit of support among member states to the G20 gathering in India with regard to the African Union's joining of this particular group. Do tell us more.
Exactly. Backed by this year's G20 host India and also approved with consensus among the 20 members, the 55-member African Union has been granted permanent membership at the G20 annual summits. Reportedly, there was widespread support for the inclusion of the AU, especially from India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on the back of his push for a greater voice to the global south. With that, the AU has become the second regional bloc after the EU, or European Union, to become a permanent member of the Group of 20 or 21. That name not being finalized yet, by the way. There appeared to be agreement on that there should be more than one African nation, which is South Africa, in the G20, with a continent home to more than 1.4 billion people. Of course, welcoming the move, many African leaders hailed the decision, but also have other leaders. Let me read out what U.S. President Joe Biden said. The African Union is a critical partner. You, referring to Modi, are bringing us together, keeping us together, reminding us that we have the capacity to tackle challenges together. And Kristalina Georgieva, managing director of the IMF, said, "Let me congratulate you on your wisdom to bring AU to this table."
Right, I see. And so Brazil is hosting the gathering next year, I believe, and he shared some interesting remarks about Russia's potential participation next year, right?
Right. With you're talking about Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and the 2024 G20 summit is scheduled to take place from July 12th to the 14th in Rio de Janeiro, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has formally handed over the presidency of the G20 to Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on Sunday as the G20 summit in New Delhi concluded. The position will be held by India until November 30th this year, and Brazil's presidency thus starts from December 1st. Now, President Lula has made public three key priorities for the 2024 summit. Social inclusion and the fight against hunger is one. Energy transition and reform of global governance institutions are the second and third. And similar to Modi, Lula also wishes to not let geopolitical issues derail G20 discussions. He said, "We have no interest in a divided G20." In an interview at the sidelines in New Delhi, Lula invited Russia's Vladimir Putin to next year's G20, promising if he is president of Brazil next year, Putin won't be arrested in the country. As a matter of fact, Putin is under an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court. And Lula added that he himself plans to be at a BRICS meeting in Russia before the Rio G20.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Professor Pan, on a more national level then, what are some of the greater gains, in your opinion, with regard to this latest G20 gathering in India for President Yoon Suk-yeol?
Well, first of all, one of the greater gains was to consolidate Yoon Suk-yeol government's contribution diplomacy while showing international society the government's stern willingness and substantial plans. In the first team made under in the first session made under the theme of One Earth, President Yoon actually laid out South Korea's willingness and capability on how to do this type of things. For example, President Yoon Suk-yeol pledged $300 million to the Green Climate Fund, in addition to the previous ones. In the third session made under the theme of One Future, President Yoon laid out South Korea's roles and responsibility to preserve a rules-based order, including more support for Ukraine, enhancing the roles of multilateral development bank, and then establishing digital norms. So furthermore, President Yoon continued his sales diplomacy while taking advantage of bilateral meetings. Basically, bilateral meetings allow two players to directly grapple with important and detailed issues in promoting economic cooperation. And third, it served as a golden opportunity to gain more support for hosting Busan Expo. And then finally, as I noted earlier, it showed international society directly or indirectly how dangerous North Korea's nuclear provocations are.
Right, indeed. And so, as Professor Pan mentioned, President Yoon Suk-yeol undertook quite a number of bilateral summits on the sidelines of the G20 meeting as well. Could you tell us a bit about them and their significance?
Sure. So why don't we start with the meeting with host of G20, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. President Yoon and Prime Minister Modi agreed to bolster cooperation in defense and space, with the two countries marking 50 years of ties this year. President Yoon also met with Argentine President Alberto Fernandez. Cooperation in key mineral supply chains and energy was brought up, as the South American country is rich in resources, and hopes were expressed on joint production of lithium batteries. President Yoon also got together with his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan, speaking about cooperation in infrastructure, defense, and nuclear power plants, and expansion in trade. 2023 also marks the 10th anniversary of a bilateral FTA between the two countries. President Yoon also had a meeting with the MICTA group, which includes Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, and Australia. Solidarity between the nations was highlighted in a bid to overcome global crises. In his meeting with Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, President Yoon pledged to expand assistance in the construction of infrastructure. He also had summits with two African leaders, Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to discuss trade and investment. Significant here that Nigeria makes up 13% of Korea's trade with African countries. And also he had a summit with Comorian President Azali Assoumani to discuss ways to develop bilateral relations. President Yoon also congratulated him on the G20 membership of the African Union, as Assoumani currently is the chairperson of the bloc. The president also had the chance to hold another summit with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, where the two saw eye to eye on the need for a trilateral summit with China. And informal encounters were also held at a gala dinner. Yoon met with President Joe Biden from the U.S., with the two touching upon their recent summit at Camp David in the U.S. And he also had talks with counterparts from Singapore, France, Australia, the Netherlands. So lots of bilateral encounters. President Yoon's summit diplomacy came at an important point for South Korea, with a mission to garner more support for Busan's bid in hosting the 2030 World Expo at each of these bilaterals, as Professor Pan also mentioned.
Right. Indeed, and staying with that, against these fresh pledges of collaboration with other countries, of course, what do you believe are some of the remaining diplomatic tasks for the Yoon administration?
Well, actually, how to mitigate the new corridor mechanism remains unresolved, as we noticed how divided the world is at the G20 gathering. So, the newly designed U.S. Japan security architecture needs to pay more attention to convert the zero-sum logic to a non-zero-sum game. And similarly, this new security structure need to pay more attention to help the global south, basically. So that type of things could be a significant puzzle for dealing with global challenges. And the Japan-China summit is important as well. So it should be dealt with more delicately. For example, it is positive that President Yoon of South Korea is comparable with a premier, having a serious talk with the Premier Li Chang of China. Basically, those meeting is important. So this diplomatic arena matters because it showed the international society the trilateral framework between South Korea, the United States, and Japan is compatible with the other trilateral framework between South Korea, Japan, and China. This compatibility allows the players to help address global challenges.
And against that backdrop, Professor Pan, what do you believe then is the importance of perhaps middle powers amid this geopolitical strife among the superpowers, so to speak?
As you know, U.S. power is declining and near-peer competitors are rising, creating vacuum in preserving international system. That explains why middle powers are important. However, I believe that another group of power are rising between middle powers and great powers, which is robust power. Robust powers can be defined as a developed country with willingness and capability. A typical example is South Korea. So why do they matter? Their roles are important because a great power alone is not enough to protect an international system around the world in a situation where her power is declining.
Right, of course, you need the support of many, many countries then.
Yeah.
All right, Professor Pan, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thanks for having me.
Right, and so as always, thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
Mabuhay. I am the ambassador of the Philippines to the Republic of Korea, Teresa Dizon de Vega. As Korea moves into a more active and engaged position as a global pivotal state, and with the growing influence of Korea in many fields, not just the economy, but also in innovation, in digitalization, in saving the environment, and of course in creative content. Arirang TV has been a very important platform for bringing news and information about Korea to the rest of the world, and also as a platform for talking about and discussing